Jordan, thank you so much for this. And indeed, we all look forward to meet each and every one of you guys in person together. Until then, thanks God we have technology, and still we have our hybrid locations in Sofia and Miami to stay in touch with those of you around us. Thank you so much for all of you to be together in this mega event and a full week of really fascinating discussions and challenging and mind-opening speeches. Next, we will turn towards the lackmus of economics and of a development economy. This is about advertising, and particularly the brand agencies. Once they thrive, technology is most probably the driver for this new drive. Once they thrive, then economy thrives. And the person who is best suited to have the discussion on the voice of the brand agencies is the Columnist and Forbes and Inc. magazine, and a great friend of Webit, who's been with us in a number of events, and particularly during the virtual explosive growth of Webit to over 1.5 million people during the past 2 years. Rhett Power. Rhett, such a pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours. Looking forward to it.
Welcome to the Global Impact Week, another wonderful and amazing panel with thought leaders and people in the marketing space that really understand how brands work and how to create a brand. Today on our conversation, we're going to talk about the voice of the brand agencies. We often hear about these wonderful campaigns. We often hear about these wonderful brands that are built. But we're going to talk to the people behind that today and hear what they have to say. And we have got Nicky Bullard. She is the chairwoman of MRM Europe and chief creative officer of MRM UK. We've got Chuck Porter. He's co-founder and chairman and managing partner of Crispin Porter and Bogusky. And we've got Andrew Dimitriou, chief executive officer of EMEA and VMLY&R. And I'm going to have each of the panelists today briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to get to the questions. So, Nicky, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Oh, I love talking about myself. Thank you very much, Rhett. So yes, Nicky Bullard. I'm based in London. I have a European role, but my background is I'm a writer at heart. So I've been writing for over 30 years. I was going to say, don't tell anyone, it's a bit late. I'm writing across most disciplines and media for lots of different brands. I love my job. I feel honoured to be doing it and honoured to be here today. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Nicky. Charles.
Yeah, hi. I'm also a copywriter. I started as a copywriter, a freelance copywriter for a long time. Then I did this agency called Crispin, Porter and Bogusky. And then about 1.5 years ago, when COVID started, I began to sort of disengage from the agency. And now I'm pretty much retired, but I'll try to sound smart anyway.
I'm sure you will spread some knowledge today, Charles. Andrew.
Well, I guess, thank you, Rhett, for introduction. I'm a wannabe copywriter, so I guess we've got that in common. And I'm pretty sure my creative partners over the course of the last 25 years have accused me of leaning in to the creative department. I'm a Greek Australian living in Paris. I've happened to live across 4 continents prior to this. I love creativity in all its forms, in countries, in culture, and especially how we can build them differently across countries and cultures. And I'm happy to be here with such an esteemed panel and looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Andrew. So one of the first questions I have is, as you know, you guys have been behind some of the most famous brands and names and campaigns out there. when working with businesses, what are you trying to teach them when helping them build their brand? What are things that are hard for the businesses to understand that you do? And we'll start with Nicky, and we'll go in that same order. Let's go Nicky, Charles, and then Andrew.
Thank you, Rhett. So first of all, I'd say I would never try and teach my clients about their brands. They're the ones who are living and breathing it every single day. But what I think I'm in the business of is helping them understand the relationship that their brand has with people. So really looking deeply into that. So where in the relationship is it strong? Where is it weak? Where are there opportunities? And I do this weird thing, and I think I can't help it, having a creative background, that I will visualize a brand. And when I say that, I have in my head, when you were a kid and you used to do those dot-to-dot puzzles. So if you imagine the brand are those dots all joined up and they make a perfect image, and you know exactly what it is, and in the brand's case, who they are. And I see every dot in that image as a point of contact with a potential customer or an existing customer. And each of those points is an experience with the brand. And if the experience is off and isn't on tone or sounds different or doesn't feel authentic to what the brand stands for, it's going to go askew, which means that your image of the brand won't be complete and won't be perfect. And that's how I visualize it. So I'm very conscious of working across all those different touch points, that the brand potency is as high as it can possibly be.
Charles?
Yeah, I agree with everything Nicky said. I think, when you say, what are you trying to teach your clients? I agree with her. It's hard to teach clients about their brand, but I think you can teach them about communicating. I think she's exactly right about creating a total brand impression. I think there are timeless things like storytelling that it's important to remind clients of. And I think there are also more timely things. I think right now, most marketers are very, very involved with analytics, and particularly predictive analytics, which is, it's been around for a while. It's playing a larger and larger role in our business. And it's great. It's an enormously valuable tool. But I think that the one thing you don't get from predictive analytics, I don't want to talk about this forever, but I think it's a topic that's current right now. Predictive analytics models how people will behave based on the way they used to behave. And what it leaves out is surprise. What it leaves out is the black swan, something that never happened. And I think one of the reasons that 94% of the pollsters in the United States said Trump was lose, and they were wrong, is because there had never been anything like it. It was a brand new thing. And there are always brand new things. People love brand new things. People like surprise. So I think, one of the things we have talked to our clients about a lot is use analytics for what it's good for, but what it's not good for is creating something new. If it was, every songwriter would be John Lennon.
Yeah, and I think just to pick up on that, since I'm the last of the trio, I'll say Rhett the introduction, but I completely agree with both of the things that I've said behind it. And if I were to just pick up on what you said, Charles, is like the one thing that I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about is how do we surprise and delight the consumers, right? Because ultimately that's what our job is. And I think there is the unknown. When you're trying to do something new and trying to surprise and delight a consumer, that's not validated yet. It's an experience that's not yet created. The iPhone didn't exist before Steve Jobs imagined it. And therefore, he had to convince people of his imagination, of the story in the future of what it would be like. And that takes a sense of being brave. And I think in the world of analytics and in the world of joining the dots, I think we are losing a little bit of braveness inside of our clients. And so the one thing that I try to encourage, obviously, is to be creatively brave, because I think once we as agencies particularly, the value we bring to our clients is in the power of our creativity. And I think for me, if we lose that as our North Star as agencies, then, you know, we can become a data and analytics firm, or we can become anything else. But I think the value we bring to our clients is in creativity.
So I think that's an interesting point, Andrew, and I want to expand on that maybe a little bit, take that question a little further. Is there a sense from you guys that brands have to be more courageous now? And Charles, you brought up the Trump election and stuff, and I don't want to go into politics, but it seems like to me more brands are taking a stance on social issues. They're taking a stance on things that maybe brands or businesses wouldn't have taken a stand on before. You look at Nike, you look at Patagonia, you look at some of these big brands. Is that something where, do you think that agencies have to push or encourage or help companies now be more courageous in their branding and in their marketing?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
And we'll go with Andrew can do it, and then we can go back. We can go backwards. We can go backwards. Yeah.
I think, you know, I mean, I think what's true, what Charles said is storytelling is timeless and it will always be there. I think, you know, obviously brands that what we call story doing, or that they actually do things and do the things they say, is really important. What social media has given us is the ability to be transparent with everyone. So that means for brands as well, they have to be transparent with everyone, because the power of choice lies in the consumer, and it's quite easy to get information on everyone. And I think, you know, a couple of examples here in France, where I'm based, a supermarket chain doesn't throw away all of their expired foods, but they go and deliver it at their cost to food banks. And so that's doing good for the environment and doing good for the brand. And I think there's a lot. You mentioned Nike and Patagonia, well-known stories that give back. But I think consumers are demanding more transparency, and they're demanding what their choices are leaving on the environment. And as such, we as communicators have got to make sure that we're pushing brands to be as open and transparent and good for society as we can.
And do you think that there's an element of courage in there, though, where they're going to have to be more bold in what they stand for?
I think that businesses have to change sometimes in completely their business models to be able to deliver for the new. Even if you look at retail, fast fashion at the moment, fast fashion is one of the largest polluters on the planet, but you're starting to see some of the fast fashion retailers now bring in your clothes for recycling, and we'll recycle these clothes and make them new clothes. So they've had to rethink the total chain, and that's a courageous decision, because it means cost for a business, it means a brand, and it's really, I think it's really where the future is going. If they don't do it, their competitor will, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Charles, what do you think?
Should I talk? I don't know how this works. So
go ahead. No, go ahead, Charles, and then we'll hear from Nicky.
I think that this is a really, really complicated issue that marketers are really struggling with. I mean, I think, you know, you're talking about courageous. I think there are sort of two different kinds of things have become so polarized politically, not only in the US, but most places. And so taking a position on certain kinds of issues like sustainability and stuff like that, everyone likes them. So it's very, very easy to say, we are going to give, you know, food to people who need it. Everyone's in favor of that. We're going to pollute less. We're going to use less energy. Those are things everyone's in favor of. There are other issues like racism and things like that, certainly in the US, that are much more polarized. And if you want to take a position on that, that's where it requires courage. And I think certain brands, like you mentioned, Nike and certain other brands, are staking out those positions. And I think for the audience they're talking to, it's probably very potent. There will always be brands that do not want to be controversial in any way. Disney or McDonald's or brands like that. So I think that they will tend to do things that everyone's in favor of, that are activist things. They're less likely to do things that are politically controversial. But I also agree with what was said before, which is for all brands, and we used to tell all of our clients this: what you do is more important than what you say, because transparency is the new black, and everyone knows what you do. And for Domino's Pizza, for example, a recent campaign we did, basically they came out and said, we want your pizza to get to your house okay, so we're going to start filling potholes in streets all over America. And that was something everybody loved. And it was something they actually did, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's useful to this conversation or not, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
No, but it's a bold thing, particularly after some of their challenges, right? And some of their bad press and some of the things, right? So it's
well,
outside
everyone gets bad press. I have a daughter who works at Facebook, and I hear about bad press every day. So
I think it's quite interesting
talking. It's something
that's
that's useful, and I think that's pretty bold. But go ahead, Nicky.
Sorry, I jumped in then. I was trying to get with the rhythm of the answer. Sorry. So bravery and courage, and what does it really mean? I think, there are some wonderful things that brands are doing, and it can be very brave, creating a statement piece of work. But I think what real bravery is and courage is, from a brand point of view, is making a statement of intent as a brand and sticking to it. So a couple of examples of brands we work with: L'Oreal, so helping every woman see her self-worth; Microsoft, empowering people and organizations to do more, and sticking with those statements of intent, those as we call them, meaningful roles, and sticking with them for years, not just making one-off statements and responding to what's happening in culture at that moment in time, which is very important, but actually saying, no, we've put a stake in the ground. This is our purpose. This is our mission. This is what we're going to do to help better mankind, and sticking to it. And for me, that's real bravery, not just changing with the zeitgeist, but really sticking to your mission and making a really long-term difference.
Thank you, Nicky. I tend to agree with that point. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about COVID and how that might have changed the agency business. And, has it changed the model, changed the way agencies work? And so talk a little bit about your experience in the past couple of years coming through COVID and how that has changed your work, and is there change going forward? Is there going to change the way that brands and agencies work together? And Nicky, if you want to go back in reverse, we'll start there. We'll give you the first stab at that.
I mean, absolutely. What a couple of years, and horrific in so many ways, but super inspiring in so many others. So for me, I feel like, the world, everybody, all of us on this call individually have taken one big deep breath, and so has the industry, and thought, hang on a minute, is this the way we want to move forward? We've reappraised our relationships with each other. Our employees are reappraising their relationships with us, and vice versa. Our brands that we're working with are reappraising the relationships with their customers. And I think it's a wonderful moment for, as Charles was saying earlier about new, we've got a moment where we can be new and renew, which I think is incredible. And there's also, I feel it, and I don't know if this is just a UK thing, but I'm feeling this sort of positive impatience now. We're realizing that, stuff can happen that we don't expect. So we better do the stuff we need to do sooner rather than later. And I love this sense of, come on, our industry, there's a lot of stuff we've still got to sort out, but there is this impatience that we're going to do it as fast as we can and as best as we can. So I think there's been some wonderful things that have come out of the last 18 months to 2 years. I think also from a messaging point of view, transparency and trust, and we've already touched on that already, is super important. And I was looking at, just to be prepared and have a few stats for this recording, I looked at a recent Retail Week survey, and from that it said that 60%, this is UK focus, but 60% of consumers have more faith in the brands than they do governments. I'm not surprised. It probably is a bit more actually in the UK at the moment. And 9 out of 10 are really valuing those brands that were really helpful and useful during the pandemic. And the good news is that 84% still want to hear from brands. So there is a real positivity, I think, there now, and there's a real opportunity for brands to really look at the experience that customers are having every time they interact with them, and to really differentiate themselves from their competitors. So I feel an energy that is brewing, coming through the complications and the hell, but feeling a sense of sunlight at the other end. So I'm feeling super positive, as you can probably tell. Sorry, I went on there.
Thank you, Nicky. I think that's an interesting point. I want to get into some of those stats in just a minute, but let's hear from Charles and then Andrew.
Well, in terms of how the pandemic affected things, I mean, obviously it affected the way we work. Everyone knows that. When are we going to get back to normal? Nobody knows that, probably never. In terms of the way it affected the mindset of the world, I mean, I think Nicky's exactly right. Nobody trusts anybody anymore. I mean, it's the same in the US. Trust in government has plummeted. Trust in the media has plummeted, partly because of I think sort of the back and forth we've had on vaccines. It has further polarized the audience. I mean, I know that every country has it. We have it, these anti-vaxxers who believe it's become kind of crazy, and I think it's become kind of scary. And I think that not particularly for marketers, but for all of us, trying to figure out how to mend this is going to be a big task that that everybody's got to sort of start on.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with both comments really more. It's I think if I was just to add something, just from a different tangent here for a little bit, but what the pandemic did, I love this concept of new and renew. I think I would add also turbocharge to it. And the turbocharge part is how our clients behaved in the digital transformation and acceleration path. So they took a moment to renew, and then they really accelerated whatever that 3-year roadmap was. Now it was 6 months and 3 months and what was yesterday. And so we've helped a lot of clients kind of really transition, moving from offline sales to online sales, moving from what was a traditional sales models to now selling in D2C and e-commerce. But I think for me, what's fascinating, and I'm just generally an optimist, but I like to think about the positive outcomes of the moment of pause, and it's really changed the dynamic of work. I mean, if I was to think back, we talk about this, and I'll be the first one to say it on the call, the word metaverse, but that, someone had to say it first, so I thought I'd get it in there. But all kidding aside, the acceleration into the metaverse happened because of COVID, because we are now on a Zoom call, we're on virtual reality, and soon enough we'll be wearing our headsets, sitting around a table, pretending we're all better looking than we really are. But I do think this acceleration into the digital sphere is here to stay, and it is a continuum state of change. This pace of change that we had now lived in the last 24 months will only continue to accelerate, not decelerate. And this for me is one of the biggest aha moments. So in the past, we were on a roadmap and everything was done in stage gates and roadblocks and whatever other term we want to use. But now it's, let's do it real fast, let's do it real quickly, and let's do it real and get there. And I think that mentality is here to stay. We feel it every day with our largest client partners that we work with. And I think, and we have to be a utility, and we have to be nice, and we have to understand the culture, and we have to understand the anti-vaxxers, and we have to do all of the digital transformation help that we can. So it's a challenge to get it all done. But I do think that the one positive coming out is, the acceleration to digital channels for our brands, I think.
So Andrew and Nicky, you guys hit on some interesting things that I want to sort of come back to in a different way, maybe. You know, I think there's been a huge, and if you look at the trends and you look at the data out there, you look at the Fortune 500 over the last 20 years, those companies are failing at an alarming rate. It used to be that you stayed on the Fortune 500 for 75 years. I think the average lifespan of a company like that now is 11 years in the Fortune 500. So you have a bunch of disruption going on. You have COVID, you have digital disruption, you have all kinds of disruption going on in the markets. And these new companies coming in who have replaced some of their older, more established companies that we thought of and all know the names. Is there something different about working with a company that is just coming into, is gone through explosive growth and huge growth, and is there something different about working with a company like that versus an older, more established, big company? Is there a difference for an agency or a difference in the work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
Sorry.
So
No.
Charles, why don't you start this time?
No. Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely that the whole industry has changed dramatically. 20 years ago, there were these giant whale clients that would pay agencies retainers of 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars a year. They're basically gone because the new emerging companies don't work that way. In my experience, anyway, the new emerging companies, they're fast and they're nimble and they're cheap. And, their attitude is, I don't need to pay this partner a whole ton of money. There are 100 people out there who can do cool stuff, and we'll use these people to do that. And it's made a gigantic difference in the industry. And I think it's probably going to end up for the better because the people that are now creating content are moving faster. I mean, the great days of the agency business were even before I came. It was the Mad Men days when you'd get a client, you'd make 3 TV spots and run them for a year and go drink martinis. It was a great life. Now everybody's working 24/7 because of social media, and advertising is a conversation. It's not an announcement anymore. So I'm digressing, but to answer your question, yes, it's dramatically different.
What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's dramatically different. I would say it is dramatically different on one side, but I think the amount of change that's happened in the disruptors has actually forced these legacy clients, if you will, to speed up, to be more agile, to think differently. Even, like I distinctly remember a situation where, we happened to work with a large oral care company globally, and their competitor came into Mexico. They mobilized an entire workforce, 24 hours down there, boots on the ground. We had things in shelf, on market within a month, and that's because it was tenacious, creative, and it was competitive. And I think those 3 things apply to any disruptor. But I do agree with Charles. The disruptors, they just have an entrepreneurial spirit. So they're not big onto process or legacy systems or approvals, largely because they're founder run, or if you think about the biggest disruptors now, there is a founder or a founding team that's still in the business, and they're just used to doing the things that they want to do, when they want to do them, and how they want to do them. And I think that pace of change can sometimes be a weakness for some of the larger clients that we have access to.
I think it's quite interesting just thinking about what we were talking about, and I was talking about those brands and that bravery and that sort of sticking to your sort of mission or purpose for years. And I think those bigger brands that have been around for a long time, those brands who've stuck to their values, but going back to renewal and reinvention, who recognize that things change and that you have to evolve to survive, but not just survive, but to thrive. I think that's where it's really interesting, and that's our role as, you know, as the agencies, is to guide those brands and those businesses and say, look, you know, we're not changing who you are, but maybe we need to change how you message what you're doing. And I think that's where our skills come in with the brand. So I think, you know, and then the younger brands, they have another challenge, which is then possibly not as established as the older ones. They may not already have the trust of the amount of experiences that the other brands have with their customers. So it's sort of a bit of a balance, actually. But I think those larger brands who recognize, you know, how creativity and reinvention can keep them relevant, I think are the ones who are still thriving and doing brilliantly.
So, I mean, those are great points, and thank you. I think that also leads sort of as a great segue into when you talked about purpose. Is it essential for brands now? I mean, I had an interesting conversation this morning with Tim Draper, and he was commenting on something Jamie Dimon said about, you know, the purpose of business now is for social good, not business. And it was an interesting dialogue. And so what do you think about brands and their social projects or their social good? Or, you know, you see, again, go back to Nike and Patagonia and a lot of other brands, they're really intertwining their social good work with their purpose and what they do. And is that something you think is going to be essential going forward? Or are we in a phase of some sort?
I can jump in here. I mean, I think, you know, 9 out of 10 people expect brands to be a positive influence on society and social good. Okay, so I think that's really important, but it is a balance. You know, businesses won't survive and be able to do more good if they're not making money. So I think it is that balance. You talked about that sort of intertwining both. I think if a business is that 1 out of 10 businesses that isn't doing that, and you're all about profit, as good as your product might be, I think your customers will smell it, taste it, and eventually reject it. I think looking back at, and I mentioned a couple of those clients, L'Oreal and Microsoft. L'Oreal's share price has quadrupled since 2006. Microsoft has gone up 200% since 2015. And I don't think, I haven't the proof, I don't think that's because they're not being purposes, but I think it's because they are being purposeful. So I think one can feed the other, and I think that's what's the beautiful thing, but it absolutely is a balance. I do think one thing that brands, you know, that all of us are on this mission is to acknowledge our responsibility as an industry, but also our brands that we work with, the responsibility to challenge stereotypes. And I think that's a generic purpose that the whole industry is behind. And I think of that as, you know, I call it the image library in our heads. So if I was to say to you, Rhett, you know, think of a doctor, an image is going to pop up in your head, right? Now that image wasn't actually created by you. It's a creation of all the images that people like us are putting out into culture. So I think those stereotypes are created by us. So we need to change the images we're putting out to culture. And I think there's a real, like I say, this positive impatience for us to change things. And I think with our clients being more purposeful and using their profits to do social good and to change also, and using the work that we do to change what's happening in the world and to make it a better place, is a wonderful thing. So I think more and more agencies are choosing who they work with and choosing it. This is what definitely one of the criteria. They want to work with brands who are purposeful.
I think you're right. I think that social consciousness is clearly becoming more and more important for the audience, particularly the young audience. I also think this. I think that people or consumers, or whatever you want to call them, the audience, can smell bullshit from 10 miles away. And I think that if you're going to take a position, you really have to live it. You can't just make a pretty commercial about it, because people will see right through it. And this comes from the comment about Jamie Dimon talking about the purpose of business now is to do good. I mean, I'm curious to know what Jamie Dimon's bonus was last year. I think it was roughly $40 million. So that stuff gets found out, So I think it's tricky. And I think unless you're really walking the walk, you're gonna get scalded.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Charles. I think maybe people try to separate purpose and profit, and actually they have to go hand in hand. I would say that the purpose and the profit should be intertwined together, so that there is transparency behind it. We were lucky enough to work on a project, and basically it was with BNP Paribas and the Gazeta newspaper in Poland, and essentially both of them had equity goals. And so we came up with this idea simply that most of the people in Poland were getting their female education through porn magazines. So we convinced the clients to buy the porn magazine, shut it down, and relaunch it with education about famous women and all the entrepreneurs. So when they went to buy the magazine, they actually learned about something. And so it's these kind of acts that really brands actually had to go in and buy a magazine, like they bought the company so that magazine now is an education platform for females. So I think that's the kind of thing I think that Charles was talking about, but that goes hand in hand, purpose and profit, right? So I think for me, these are, if you separate it and you only do good, you won't be doing good for a long time because you won't have any money for it. And if you only aim profit, then the consumers won't give you any more money because they want you to do both. So at any time, so you kind of need to bring those two together. And sometimes it's okay not to have a lofty purpose. Everyone thinks that it's, I need to save the world. Maybe just recycling one bottle a day could be a purpose for you if you're a bottling company. It doesn't have to, it could be a small purpose that does incremental good. I think the word purpose, everyone continues to think, oh, it's this grand, ambitious that we're going to save the world with this brand. Actually, you're a pizza maker, so filling the potholes is good for you. And that's a great purpose to have. And that helps me with my profit because I'm going to deliver pizzas faster. So I think it's important, but it has to be related to the brand and it has to be tied to profit to be meaningful, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. But I would even throw in a word, trust, maybe being a trusted brand. I mean, it doesn't always have to be purpose-driven, but there does have to be trust. And is that different than building a purposeful brand, you think? And anybody can jump in.
Yeah, I think brand trust comes from a series of actions that you've given to the consumers and credibility that whatever you said you're going to deliver, you have delivered, And so that comes over time. And I think brand trust in today's world where we have social media, which is, I call it the social dismedia. So it's the disinformation networks that are out there. And brands are looked upon to a large extent, sometimes more powerful than governments as a whole. So they have to be trusted and they have to be true to what they say. And I think consumers, they can't vote governments out every day, but they can vote brands out every day. So having good trust in the brand, I think, is a really powerful choice for consumers. So that.
Yeah, and I think as well, go back, be purposeful with care, because I think, like Charles was saying about the smelling the bullshit thing, is thinking about the brand. Does the brand have permission? It's a funny word, but permission to be purposeful about this. Because if they don't, and the consumer thinks they're jumping on some sort of bandwagon, back to the trust will be gone. And it's very quick. It's like with human beings. If me and Andrew have known each other for 20 years, which we haven't, we've known each other 20 minutes, but if we'd known each other 20 years and he did something that was really, when someone does something, you go, oh my goodness, he's not the person I thought he was. That can happen overnight. That can happen in 5 minutes and he won't be in my life any longer, but I'm sure he wouldn't do that. And I'd love to be in my life for longer. But yeah, but you know what I'm saying? It's that inauthenticity. If you will be found out, you might get away with it for a sec, but you will be found out. So it's, choose, if you're going to be purposeful, make sure it's at the heart of your business, it's meaningful to you as a business and those customers that you know so well.
Yeah, like Charles said, the $40 million bonus doesn't speak to a genuineness of that statement, right?
I don't, I don't know if that was the exact number. My hunch is I may be low.
Fair enough. So I guess one final question I think is I'm actually fascinated by, and that is, what is the future of the agency business, and is this an environment where the big Goliaths are going to stick around like the Edelmans, or are we going to see an explosion or a thriving of the small boutique agencies? I'm just kind of curious, where do you think the market is going, and how is the business, what's the business going to look like in 5 or 10 years? And anybody can jump in. I think Andrew hadn't jumped in first in a bit, so let's start with Andrew.
That's a question I have been asked
or Charles.
a million times. And my answer has always been, at our agency, we never really thought about what's the future of the business going to look like. We always, and it started from the very inception of the business. I had never even worked for an agency, so I didn't know how to do a business plan or projections. I said, what we know how to do is do really good work. So do really good work today, and tomorrow will take care of itself. And that's always been our philosophy. And I don't think anybody knows what it's going to look like. I think my sense is the biggest challenge for our business right now is talent, finding great talent. There used to be, in the old days, in the US, you could either go into show business or advertising. Those are the two places where creative people went. Now there are a million places, and they go to game companies or they go wherever, and talent is getting harder and harder to find. And it doesn't look to me like that's going to change. I saw a thing on television here yesterday about a trucking company in Texas that was paying their senior truck drivers $14,000 a week. That's a real number, $14,000 a week. And so I'm thinking, if I was still running the agency, my advice to my creative team would be, go learn to drive a truck, because you're going to do much, much better there. I think it's, I don't know how that problem's going to get solved. You guys are still in the business actively day to day. Am I right or not?
I think you're right on the war on talent, for sure. I think we've never had more options as employees, right? So you mentioned, Charles, your daughter's at Facebook. That is a competitor for us from a talent point of view, or an Accenture, or each other, for example, or the entertainment business, or any creative business you can think of. The choices have expanded, just like channels have expanded, I think, in terms of choice. So I think what's important, at least for me, what I think about talent is, what can we do as a business to make our company attractive in concert against a Facebook or against a Netflix or against an Accenture. And I think for us, we pride ourselves a little bit on the culture that we like to have, because we know our culture will make a difference, and we spend behind people and learning and development, and whether it's promoting hybrid work or stay-at-home work, we have a holistic program that really tries to create a differentiator around culture, and at the entry level, not at the senior people that have been around like us for 20 plus years. And I think it's more to attract people coming into our business. And we're looking in places where we weren't looking before, maybe sometimes straight out of high school, to get creative in there, to get really new and young thinking in there. I think that's one area. The other area, I think, where it helps us with talent is also how we're thinking about capabilities. So creativity is a capability and largely runs through our organization. But if I'm thinking about, our United Rentals client, and we have an e-commerce application for construction level equipment that is like an Uber, and you can get a crane delivered to your site. That's creativity applied with technology, right? So we're lucky that we have about 1,500 technologies globally in the network, and that's a different source of talent that we go after. So we're constantly obsessed of what's the next capability that we need to have, because that's where the consumers are going. And that's also what attracts actually younger talent to our business. So the more we can tie those three things in, the better, because to be honest, I'm pretty sure working at Accenture is pretty boring. So.
Do you know what I'd say?
You just gave away your business model, Andrew. I don't know.
Thanks, Andrew.
But so Nicky, I'm going to give you the quick last word.
Okay, so the quick last word I'm going to say is, do you know what? We've talked about brands and the advertising we do for brands. We've been absolutely crap at advertising our industry. There's a whole bunch of people out there who haven't got Scooby-Doo what we do in our industry, who'd be absolutely incredible writers, you know, art directors, salespeople, selling the work in, client partners. We have been bad at advertising ourselves outside of the world, the initial world around us. And I think that's what we need to do. And I think also we are brilliant at creating culture. That's what we say we do. We need to get even more brilliant at responding to it. And I think that's what we've learned over the last 18 months.
Well, thank you guys. This has been really insightful. I think very helpful. And I'm going to turn it back to the studio. We're at Webit, Global Impact Week, and back to the studio.